Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Stephanie Hangerson from the English department, but I do not want to take up the time from our featured poets this afternoon. We have Joy Handleman and Bummi Anderson, both professors here at Albany State University, and both are natives of Georgia. And beyond that, you can look at the program to see the different directions and the different ways that they've contributed to our local community as well as to our university. So they've decided that Professor Handleman was going first. Yep. So Professor Handleman is going first. And also, please stick around so that you can ask any questions. I know for myself, I always find it fascinating to hear about inspiration for poems or their philosophy about poetry itself, because I'm kind of nerd on that side. So stay around to get some of your answers to some of your questions concerning that. So I'll give you the mic.
Hi, y'all. This is the ASU's 11th Poetry Festival. It's the first one for the new U as well. So the new ASU consolidated, and I think I just have to say this is not necessarily about poetry, but as I was getting ready this morning, I was thinking, we're here. This all outside, all this beautiful thing that is this university is here because in the early part of the 20th century, somebody had a vision to care and to sacrifice for people he and all the she's as well could not see. And you and me, we are those people. So let's celebrate it and enjoy it. I think it's an awesome thing. It's hard enough to sacrifice for people you love that you can see around you every day. It's hard, but imagine working hard, sacrificing for something you won't see. And I just, as on this sort of, it's a beginning and a continuation at the same time. I thought about that, and I thought about Dr. Holly, and I love the old part of campus. When I go over there, that's a inspiration. There's going to be some poems and photographs that come out of that place for me. I just love it. I always torture my friends when we go over there. I say, look. They're like, we're going, we got to go, Handleman, come on. No, look at this chimney. Read this. Did you read this? I love it. Anyway, about poetry, I'm so glad you invited us to talk. And by the way, Dr. Hankerson is a brave woman. She invited me having no clue what I'm going to say. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that vote of confidence. I take my inspiration for poetry in lots of different places. I'm an evangelical Christian, and sometimes I feel like all my poems ought to send you running straight to God, and then I say, no, that's God's business. That's not mine. My business is to share with you a little of what I see, a little of what's valuable, what I think is true, and see what you think and how you respond to it. So that's where I come from with my poetry. This first poem, in that bio, I said that my poems remind me of pirates on leave who are suddenly converted to Christianity and don't know how to behave. This is about a pirate before he was converted. In fact, this pirate didn't get a chance to be converted. But the real genesis for the poem is just one word, Ocracoke. I read it in a friend's poem, and that name just haunted me. And this poem grew out of that one word, Ocracoke, okay? And there are two voices in this poem. One is the girl looking back on what happened, and the other is the pirate's voice singing. I will not sing for you, and believe me, y'all are grateful. You can all say thank you. Rowing to Ocracoke, a song of Edward Teach. Last night I dreamed of Ocracoke, the smell of oyster shell and sweat and him singing. my blue boat, rowing back to Ocracoke. Sweet Maggie McGee and me rowing back to Ocracoke. I'll row, 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 Maggie McGee back to Ocracoke. The wind, her ribbons red, the sea, my Maggie, how she sings for me. I'll row, row, row my blue boat right on back to Ocracoke. I'll build her a house by the sound, and there my heart will be bound. No more roving the wild, wild sea, just Maggie, her ribbons red, and me. Singing in the White Horse meant your ship was swaying in a cove, your men going in to drink in threes. 3 pirates, a party, 4, an invasion, you always said. The mistress did not seem to mind the flow of beer and wine over your gold coins. While they, your men, took their turn at parceled celebration and drank your health, you roamed the dunes and dreamed of empire spare and long. Ocracoke, Blackbeard on Ocracoke. Ocracoke, a brief battlement against the sea, your old lover, thin slip of a kingdom, and thin slip of a girl. I was 14 when you saw Jim and me building a sandcastle with wave water hauled in my tin bucket. We built it in a valley of sea oats and sand dunes nestled down, safe from wind and wave and tide. A shadow fell over the garden wall I was shaping with my hands in wet sand. I looked up. Edward Teach. You gave me your name. It stung like cloves and strained spices on my tongue. You bowed over my hand, your beard and lips on my sandy fingers. Jim jumped up and flew over a dune. My ribbons blew wildly in the wind, and so did yours, and you laughed up at the sky as if you owned it. You stepped carefully, trying not to disturb my work, and sat by me in the sand, nestled, safe from wind and wave and tide. Close your eyes, hold out your hand. 3 colored stones, a beaten gold coin, threads of twisted gold. I'll make you a necklace, Maggie McGee, if you'll wear it for me. And you did, and I wore it, under stiff white collars. Each day brought some new thing, an iridescent shell, sea glass, a black pearl, a green stone, and a red one. You fixed each to the gold threads round my neck. I had to sit very still while you wound gold around and through each stone, your fingers at work against my throat. A wild pony startled us one morning as you wove rubies against my skin. You trained him, and he followed you like a happy dog, through wind and wave and sand. Close your eyes, hold out your hand. You taught me to ride him full tilt into the waves, and that night my cold, wet frock troubled my father as he climbed the stairs to tend the light. One day the smith followed me and saw Edward Teach, black braids swinging, lift the keeper's daughter from a wild pony. The villagers had not minded loud songs in the tavern or foreign gold in the till. Yet seeing you, hearing of you, touching an island girl, you were the 4th pirate. You must have plans for their world, and you did. Just that day you sat behind me as we rode into the surf and whispered in my ear, "Won't be long now. Don't believe what you hear. Close your eyes. Hold out your hand." Your fingers had drawn my jaw, paused for a moment at my jeweled throat, and then you were down and slogging through waves to the little boat rowing out to your ship, leaving only red ribbons braided in the horse's mane. I could hear you singing my name. Was that a kiss you had given at the last? My stinging lips, a promise? My father must have seen the boat dispatched in the night, even hung the lights for help. The battle came to you after all. I heard they swung your head from the bow of the blue boat that you'd rowed to Ocracoke. A day later, red ribbons in the sand and rust stains on the beach as the white pony that loved Edward Teach ran in wind and wave and sand. In my blue boat, I'll row, row, row back to Maggie McGee and to Ocracoke. The wind, her ribbons red, the sea, my Maggie, how she sings for me. I'll row, row, row my blue boat right on back to Ocracoke. I'll build her a house by the sound, and there my heart will be bound. No more roving the wild, wild sea, Just Maggie, her ribbons red, and me, roaming the wind and waves and sand. Close your eyes, hold out your hand. Now, this next one is a poem. My house literary critic said, do not read. Do not read that poem. This one, in fact, he couldn't stand it. For him, it was like fingers on a chalkboard. But I just have to read it. It's a real change of pace from that one. And it rhymes a lot. And it's very sing-songy. And I just had to read it. Uncle Will, he killed a man over Aunt Mattie's red hair. Now, Mattie was no beauty, but Will, he loved red hair. Roy Fletcher, he went dancing, and Mattie caught his eye. Roy Fletcher, he went dancing and thought he'd like to try. Mattie said no thank you and danced with Uncle Will. Roy Fletcher, he kept drinking and thinking still of Mattie, her red hair, and how she spurned him for her will. As they danced in the moonlight, the stars were not near so bright as Mattie and her red hair. Will twirled her round to find Roy Fletcher standing there. He struck a match and held it up to Mattie's red hair. Faster than a flame flickers in a breeze, Will drew a knife on Roy and sent him to his knees. Uncle Will, he killed a man over Aunt Mattie's red hair. Now, Mattie was no beauty, but Will, he loved red hair. I'll see, how can poetry make us laugh at that? But that's, anyway, it's funny. And this next one, the inspiration for this little poem, and it is a little poem. I was at Lake Loretta one day, and you know how mean those geese are at Lake Loretta. They can be really mean. But there was a swan that came out, and the swan is so beautiful on the water, but out on land, the swan looks very uncomfortable. So this is my swan poem. Swan resolves. The boys at the water's edge offer old bread and minnows. Tempted, I am not myself on land. On the green grass and black dirt, reeling drunk and confused, I stagger at the sudden stillness and solidity. From here the world does not flow, does not shimmer. The stones they throw cut my feet. I am not myself on land. Their laughter is like glass breaking. Today, on the water, I stay and glide silent and unbleeding over shards of color, light, and silver shadow. A song I must not sing quivers in my throat like new life wanting air and sun. I will sing and walk on land again when my Lord comes riding bright over the rim of the dark world. Okay. This next one is about my youngest son. Now, some of you know we lost him in 2015 to an accidental overdose. It was very sad, but this poem is not sad, though. This poem is about a part of him that was, he loved life, he loved so many things, and this is about some of his loves. So it's not sad, so don't worry. I'm not going to cry, and you don't have to feel all sad. It's called Animal Spirits, The Loves of a Child. The purple dinosaur suit with the wire tail that drove you to brief madness when it wouldn't stay straight lay crumpled on the floor of your room. You had seen a cheetah. Long, lithe, fast, so fast, then gathered in, horizontal and waiting for its prey. Cheetah. A chubby boy's second love. Supper, you told us about cheetahs, and your brother smiled. Bedtime, cheetahs. Breakfast, how fast they run, what they eat. And on the second day, your daddy called you the cat baby. Grandparents marveled at all you knew, your shining brilliance. Other children smiled at the thought of cheetahs, dreamed a bit with you, then fidgeted, grew bored, and looked sideways for escapes. Still, you told of cheetahs, and we lived through cheetah days, weeks, and months. And then you saw a jaguar. Golden and magnificent, your heart raced. I wondered how hurt the cheetahs must have been when you stopped calling. And leopards, completely overlooked the wallflowers of your childhood passions. Years later, you ran away to join the circus, only it was a wrestling ring. I saw you lounging on the ropes horizontal to the earth, party-colored tights in animal print. Long, lithe, fast, so fast, waiting for your prey. And this next one is about shells on the beach. When I was little, I loved the beach more than anything, and I thought that if I could just keep walking one day, could leave and keep walking, that I'd always be at the beach. You know, if I just didn't go back to the hotel, if I just kept walking, because it was, as far as you could see, there was beach. So I thought, okay, I'll just keep walking. So this is kind of playing on that idea that of the eternal beach, but of course it doesn't work out that way. You know, if you follow the coast, I didn't as a child. I guess I was challenged. Shells. The child bows over them. Not everyone goes in the blue bucket of tin with stars. The shells on the beach are tossed out like breadcrumbs to lead her around the edges of the known world. 1 foot in the foam of spent waves, and one on sand just where the shells lie, whole or broken. She sorts through her schoolroom knowledge of the explorers, Da Gama, Drake, Magellan, Columbus. She thinks their names, the seagoing ones, hold more pleasure and promise than Lewis and Clark. Over the sharps of shell she goes too far to be home for supper. Cut feet leave pink prints in the sand, skirting land and danger. She will come to places she cannot tip across. Following along in this beach mode, this poem is sort of a love poem to Florida, and it's a Florida of a certain time period that's still, there are vestiges of it, but it's probably the mid-60s Florida. But the poem is not all about nostalgia, and any poet who's trying to write good poetry wants to avoid nostalgia and sentimentality, and we struggle with that. But I think if you really listen, you'll hear there's a question in here that takes this beyond nostalgia, I hope. Conjuring Florida, green and blue, my map of you, a 6-year-old's dreamland. From the back seat of my parents' Ford, I read you through Technicolor billboards that fill the car windows. You call to me, Seminole heroes and legends, sea creatures, mermaids, rocket ships, ocean waves, docks that smelled of fish and blood. Oh, how I loved you. Jungle animals, next exit. Stop, oh stop, please, can we stop, please, can we please? Fresh squeezed orange juice, free. See tropical snakes live, exotic animals, exit now. Undersea windows on whirls of dolphins, sharks, and squid, starfish, gold coins, seahorses, and ocean graves, pirate ships, Spanish forts, hurricane rescues, and mermaids. Flamingos and wooded walks through swamps where deer came up to eat from my fingers, the crackers sold in red and glass dispensers, silver springs where poisonous snakes were milked for cures. And still you whispered, there's more. Get them to turn down that dirt road going into the trees. See it, see it. Like a ravenous lover, your pleasures exhausted me, all before we stopped for a night. And still, after they turned out the light, you called to me in the dark with a promise I could not explain. Was it the garden reclaimed? A place where we could name the animals who could devour us, and yet it turns out not just all right. A place driving the heart of a child to delight, over and over in sight of the gator's jaws. Tell me again, it turns out better than all right. Okay, now those are the poems that I that are approved. I have a few that are unapproved, but I may have to save those for another time. Is there anything that you want to talk about? Poetry, questions, anything? No? Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm going to read, well, I guess quite a few poems that I have. I have poems in my book, I have poems in my folder, I have poems on my phone. So, I'm gonna take from all of those, but probably mostly from my book. I have a book called entitled Gumbo Soul. I believe it was published in 2015, I believe. So I'm going to read some poems from there. So let me just start by saying that I write primarily, I write, my themes are generally Afrocentric, generally. I do like to do some love poems. So that's primarily what you'll hear. And then there are other poems that I write. I also like to write about people. I am a history buff, so if something happens, someone that I admire, I would normally write something about that person, okay? So I'm going to start with, and I'm working on a book of poetry now that actually, hopefully it will be out before the year ends or maybe next year. But I want to start with a poem that I wrote, I think it was last year. It was the year before last. But this poem is called Ali, and it's written for when Muhammad Ali passed away. I wrote this poem for him because I grew up a Muhammad Ali fan, and I just loved him so much and admired him. So when he passed away, I wanted to write something for him or about him. And it's entitled Ali. When a brute falls, people celebrate his demise. They stand on the giant with raised fist of victory. Goliath is down. However ferocious the fist, you were not a brute. You were the people's champ, and the people loved you. When you fail, we kneel down to love you. Ali. That's my poem to Muhammad Ali. A couple poems I have, another poem that I have, Albany, of course, many of you know, experienced a couple of devastating tornadoes in the first part of the year. And by my being a native Albanian, I had never experienced a tornado before. Not, in this area, not in Albany at least. And so when you're riding around the city, you kind of like, wow, because I never seen so much damage. And one of the things I did notice was the trees. It's like all the trees were just uprooted, or at least that's what it seemed like. But quite a few trees. So I wrote a poem because a tree, we get so much from a tree that I don't think sometimes we don't think about it. We get shade, a tree has life. And so I wrote a poem about Albany, and I played it off of the trees, from losing the trees. Albany, you raised me from a shrub into a powerful tree with my own branches stretching wide, and I love you. My city is strong and unbending and not wavered by winds nor driving rain. Albany is a tree planted, and I sit under you. Albany is the city of God planted by the waters. I know your imperfections, yet I see your beauty. and I stand with you. Albany. That's my poem to Albany. Then everybody be in a rush to clap. So I have a few poems, and of course I never know. I rarely know what poem I'm going to read whenever I read poetry. So, but I'm going to read a couple poems from my book, and I have them noted somewhere. Yes, one of my favorite love poems. Like I said, I do enjoy writing love poems, and so I know the question you're probably asking: well, have you ever been in love? That's not important. But you know, I do get inspired. You know, so I wanted to write some love poems. And I had so people tell me, "Oh, I love it when you write love poems." So I just continue to write them. This poem is entitled "Flooded." My head is flooded with thoughts of you. No life jacket, no preserver. You won't jump in and save me, and you see me going under? Would you save me if you knew I loved you? Give me your hand, perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation so I can breathe again, and all those thoughts of you gush out of me. I am revived. That poem is entitled "Flooded." Another poem that I wrote that's very dear to me. If you know me personally, you know that I most people who know me very well, they know that I love Maya Angelou. It's like, you know, I loved her. And so I remember the day that I was in my office at work, and I got a CNN alert that Maya Angelou had passed away. Well, my initial response was, I cried. That was my initial. Then I had to get it together. Okay, you got to get it together, you know. And then I called one of my mentors who would challenge me as a teenage writer to be Maya Angelou. And so I called her because I knew she would understand my emotions. And so we talked, and you know, I felt better, but I really had a very difficult time with her death. So I wrote a poem entitled "The Day You Left" for Maya Angelou. I cried. I didn't know what else to do. I prayed. I had nowhere else to go. I texted those I love. I had no one else to understand me. I rejoiced. You became an even bigger part of me. I wrote a poem. That is what I was born to do. That is my poem entitled "The Day You Left" for Maya Angelou. So, I also wrote a poem it's called "The Rise of the Black Man." The reason why I wrote this poem is because, of course, for the last few years, and of course historically, but really for the last few years, because of technology, we see so much police brutality. And I wrote a poem entitled "The Rise of the Black Man," in essence, celebrating men, black men, and talking about the injustices. So this is entitled again, "The Rise of the Black Man." Where is justice? Why does it hide its face from the black man? He looks upon it for light, but he only gets shade. No piercing eyes staring with conviction, only blinded by his own wayward arrogance. Justice is. Where is the black man? Beating his fist against the bloodied walls of a dream. People lifting him from irrelevance and into the light of significance. It is not his blood, but that of a nation who knows him not. He will stand before that nation, and it shall look upon him and be ashamed. He will be who he is. Great he shall be. The rise of the black man. So, another poem I have is called "Sister to Sister." I actually wrote this poem when I was a college student. And so I included in my book of poetry. So keep in mind, I was probably, 20 years old maybe at the time. And so I wrote a poem where I celebrated African-American women, and I referred to a lot of women whom I admire, such as Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, Nikki Giovanni, Betty Shabazz, so on and so forth. And so I wrote a poem entitled Sister to Sister. I was born to tell you, my sister, that my love for you flows like the waters of the Nile. And what life and spirit that comes from me is for you and the gifts you have given to the world. You are as the full moon, giving light in deep darkness. When life is without form and void, you come like the Spirit of God, saying, let there be light. You are Ruth, Naomi, and Mary. You are my sister. You are the hope that God's blessings have given. Your sweet and gentle nature is the scaffold that shall become the peace of the earth. You are Africa in America, beautiful and strong. You are Nefertiti, Cleopatra, and the Queen of Sheba. You are my sister. You are the first history book, speaking to the greatness of the struggle, of the slave and the free, a queen before captivity. Despite the rugged path and dark night, you are like the North Star, guiding us into what we can become. You are Harriet, Sojourner, and Fannie Lou. You are my sister. You are the architect of the greatest survival, the painter whose brush creates a joy unspeakable into the hearts of our people. Every stroke is a symbol of justice. Every word is a vessel of freedom. You are Maya, Sonia, and Nikki. You are my sister. You breathe your spirit into me, and I rejoice from the depths of my soul. Africa is embedded in your very nature, and she comes into existence through your nurture and grace. You are a symbol of my heritage, a star that guides. You are Angela, Bernice, and Betty. You are my sister. You are the mother of the earth, the mother of Jesus, of Moses, and Muhammad. An African queen you are. I know you. I know myself. You are a woman, beautiful, black. I am. And that is my poem, You Are My Sister. Sister to Sister. Another poem I want to read, because again, these are themes that I love to write about. Afrocentric themes. Black is Beautiful is the title of this poem. It's a 5-part poem, but I'm going to read you just the first part. I am as beautiful as the sunrise over the Atlantic. Everything about me is an awesome wonder, for I am beautiful. Even my thoughts are like precious crystal, so I hold them carefully and treat them with meticulous attention. My thoughts are beautiful. My every feature is the essence of beauty. I don't look down on myself. I know He made me this way. My nose may be big, but it's who I am, as I am large in my countenance. Men look at me and wonder, how come she's so beautiful? I am many shades. I am my own rainbow. I am tan, brown, vanilla, and chocolate. All of which are so beautiful, even I have learned to shake my head in amazement at my own self. Look at me. I am many dimensions, that even when I walk, eyes turn and feet stand still. They stop and wonder what it is like to be me. You look at my lips and say they're too big, yet you want them as your own, because they seem to do more than speak. The fullness of my lips makes even a simple kiss worthwhile. Men forget their names when sisters sing. I have been raped by the words of others and told to hate myself, but something inside me keeps telling me I am stunning. My hair comes in many textures that none can keep their hands out of it. Whether it is the kinkiness or the waves, it makes the hair stand up on your head. I make you ask questions only I can answer. That you're still scratching your head when I'm through. And even you have realized, I am beautiful. And that is my poem, Black is Beautiful. This poem I wrote is called The Unwanted Guest. And when I wrote this poem, I asked, what do you think, who do you think it is? I think maybe one person, since I've asked the question, knows what I'm talking about. So I like the poem because I hope it makes you think, which is why I wrote it the way that I wrote it. It's called Unwanted Guest. I never call before I make my entrance. Even if you know months in advance, my visit is still unexpected. No one can pin down the exact second of my visitation. My timing is never perfect, but sure. Sometimes I come to the sick and suffering. My arrival may be sweetness to the one I come to see, but leave a bitter taste in the mouths of those who are left. If I stay too long, my presence leaves a distinguishable stench. Why do I exert my power over the powerful and the powerless? The strongest man falls to his knees and balls himself in a corner when he sees me. He beats his fist against the hardwood floor beneath him, weakened by the indelible presence that shrank his heart into that of a little boy. I make grown men cry. I fill their hearts with anger and a million questions I don't even turn to answer. My sting is as a wasp disturbed innocently by two kids falling against marigolds. You don't always know I'm there until I've gone in for the kill. You disturb my peace with your dangerous living, no regard for youth and a belief you will live forever. You eat what you shouldn't eat, then think and never think to exercise until your doctor tells you I'm making reservations. I never stay around to comfort the wounded, and the faint of heart knows I don't come to make friends. No apologies uttered from my lips. If you're waiting for me to say I'm sorry, I won't. Even if the sun is shining, its radiance is overtaken by a deep, dark depression and smothered by the dimness I bring. I never come to stay. I guess that's why I never make friends. Who knows what I'm referring to? Death. I'm referring to you person number 2. That's it. I'm referring to death. I don't know why I wrote that poem. I don't know why. But thank you. So I have a twin sister. We are totally different. Like totally. But my sister is actually an artist, so she paints pictures with paint. You know, I try to paint pictures with words, and so, you know, sometimes we work well together, but most times we don't. But that's a whole nother story. But I wrote a poem. This poem also was probably written when I was in college or just coming out of college, just graduated from college. And you know, when you have a twin, it's very, very interesting. I'll leave it at that. But we're very different. We're not identical in any way, even physically. We're different. You probably can tell we're sisters, but most people, you know, are surprised when we say that we're twins. So of course, we're fraternal. But we come from a family of twins. My mother has 3 sets of siblings who are twins. And then I have, I think, 3 other sets of siblings in my generation. So about 7 of us, 7 sets of twins. And so I wanted to kind of, because my sister and I, we have been together, you know, this is the person I've been with like longer than I've been with anybody else. This is my twin sister. So I thought about, I wonder what it was like to be inside Mama's belly. So I wrote a poem entitled Live from Mama's Belly. How can I see inside the womb? I don't know if I have enough room to move, to be, to create. All I know, it is dark in here. No light, no sight, no switch to flicker with. Just darkness and me, looking at one another, wanting light to rescue one from the other. That is live from Mama's belly. There was another one I wanted to read. And, of course, yes. There's a, well, he's a hero to me. Let me start with that. Albany has a hero in the city, other than my father's my first hero. But in this poem, I'm talking about Charles Sherrod. If you know anything about the Civil Rights Movement, you know anything about Albany Movement, then you would know Charles Sherrod. And so I wrote a poem about him. I dedicated the poem to him, but I was talking about all of the warriors of the Civil Rights Movement. And so he really inspired this poem. Charles Sherrod, as he would tell you, has known me before I knew myself. That's what he would tell you. My father saw him. He was 16 years old, baby, at a civil rights rally in Moultrie, and my dad followed him to civil rights movement. So he inspired my father, and so he inspired me. And so I wrote a poem about those giants of the civil rights movement. This poem is entitled Warriors. Standing on the shoulders of men, we dare not sit unless to bend, and listen as the elders speak, to ensure future days not bleak. Standing on the shoulders of women, not to repeat history again, but their lessons we humbly keep, to ensure future days not bleak. Elders, we call out to you first, since you have seen the days of thirst. It is your knowledge that we seek, to ensure future days not bleak. Warriors, cast your spears into our hands. Where you fight, your legacy stands. I will fight for justice, strong, not weak, to ensure future days not bleak. And that is entitled Warriors. Are there any questions? Any questions? Comments?
I have a question.
Yes?
When you write, did you just set aside a time each day to write, or you wait till you're inspired, or how do you write?
Well, actually, right now, I'm going through a little writer's block. I've been going through it. I write by inspiration. And sometimes I set aside time to write. I don't write to. The thing about me, I know a lot of people write to produce works. I don't do that. I don't write to produce a book. I don't write to publish a book. I write just to write. And then if I feel I think I'll put this in a book, or I think I'm ready for that, then I'll do it. Depending upon different stages of my life. Of course, now I have to make time to write, because life is, when I was 16 years old, 21 years old, I didn't have any bills. I didn't have, I was a college student. I could write, all the time. I used to write poetry when I was here at Albany State, and I would tape my poetry to the doors of Holly Hall, for example, or to a tree or something, and I could just be writing that, and then I could be upstairs somewhere in Holly Hall and just writing something, then I'd type it up and let someone read it, and then I'll take it out and put it on the front door of Holly Hall. But I had a whole lot of time to do that. So now I make time to do it, but mostly by inspiration. I go through seasons where I'm really inspired, and then when things happen, that inspires me. Like I said, Muhammad Ali, when he died, that inspired me. What I do, especially if it's somebody like Ali, for example, I will find myself going back, looking at documentaries, I'll look at YouTube videos because he was such a brash person. And so I just love that about him. And so that would inspire me to write different things. So I look for inspiration a lot, but sometimes I don't have to. It just happens. So both things. I write by inspiration and I make time to write. Yes. Questions? Okay. No questions. Thank you all very much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professors Handleman and Anderson, for sharing with us today. And also, I'm sure they'll be milling around a little bit, so if you're too shy to ask a question out in front of a crowd, feel free to, I'm sure they'll welcome any questions from you individually. So hopefully you got a program, and in the program you'll see that we have some other sessions. We have another session at 1:30, and then tonight we'll be honored with a reading from Carl Phillips at 6:30, so you don't want to miss that. And then we also have some events during the day tomorrow. So we try to have both sides, of course, our poets themselves, but also people who study poetry. So if that's something that you're interested in, that's also something that is open to you. So thanks for coming, and hopefully I'll see you later on today.